ever in the history of the world has there been a couple that has grifted as hard and as successfully as they have, right? You just grifted off of your family.
Her do these physical acts and bellies moving and disappearing throughout her pregnancy that gave you pause.
Son Archie, and even her daughter Lilibet. And many people even wonder, are their children even...
Something was off from the very beginning, and once people noticed it, they could not unsee it. A story meant to inspire suddenly started triggering suspicion, whispers, rewinds, screenshots, and one brutal question spreading across the internet like wildfire: what if the truth being sold was never the truth at all? It began with Meghan Markle stepping back into the spotlight, carefully framed, perfectly composed, sharing an emotional retelling of one of the most personal moments any mother could speak about. The room leaned in. Cameras flashed. Faces softened. Her voice trembled at just the right moments. Every pause seemed placed with surgical precision. It looked heartfelt. It sounded intimate. It felt designed to make millions believe they were witnessing raw honesty in real time. But then the internet did what it always does when something feels too polished. It went back. It replayed old interviews. It compared previous statements. It lined up timelines. And suddenly the cracks began showing everywhere. Dates that once sounded clear became blurry. Details previously described one way now appeared completely different. What had once been difficult and chaotic now sounded smooth, cinematic, almost scripted. A memory that should have stayed naturally messy looked strangely cleaned up. And when audiences see a story becoming prettier every time it is told, they stop hearing vulnerability and start hearing strategy. That is when admiration began turning into suspicion. Fast. Because motherhood is different. People may forgive polished interviews, celebrity branding, staged photos, even carefully managed public images. But motherhood sits in a place many consider sacred. It is supposed to be unfiltered, untidy, deeply human. So when viewers started feeling that even this chapter had been converted into performance, the reaction hit harder than anyone expected. This was no longer gossip. To many watching, it felt like a line had been crossed. Then came the voice that poured gasoline on the fire. A sharp-tongued media personality stepped into the conversation with zero hesitation and no interest in softening the blow. No cautious language, no balanced disclaimer, no slow build-up, just direct fire. She accused Meghan of turning pain into production, sympathy into branding, and private life into a monetized storyline. But what made people stop scrolling was not just the accusation. It was the receipts. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips were placed side by side. Contradictions were highlighted one after another. The same story told multiple ways on multiple platforms with small but powerful changes each time. She did not need to shout. The evidence did the shouting for her. Her tone carried something dangerous, certainty. The kind of certainty that makes audiences think, wait, has this pattern been obvious all along? Comments exploded. People who had quietly doubted for months suddenly felt validated. Those who had defended Meghan started growing quieter. Others who had never paid attention before were suddenly dragged into the drama because it no longer looked like celebrity chatter. It looked like exposure. One viral clip from that critic was spreading faster than years of glossy interviews and polished documentaries combined. And then the conversation widened. It was no longer about one emotional birth story. It became about something much larger. Image laundering. The idea that over time, inconvenient details disappear, rough edges get softened, old versions vanish, and a cleaner character emerges for public consumption. Critics claimed Meghan had not just been managing an image. They said she had been editing history in slow motion. Once people looked through that lens, everything changed. The Netflix version, the interview version, the magazine version, the live stage version, each one slightly different. Each one somehow more flattering than the last. Every road in the narrative seemed to lead back to the same destination. Meghan as victim, Meghan as misunderstood hero, Meghan as the central figure in every redemption arc. For a while, it worked beautifully. But when too many versions exist, people began asking which one is real. And then they started digging deeper. What they found was not only contradictions, it was absence. Old blog posts gone, photos missing, past associations faded away, captions erased, interviews buried. On their own, any one of those things might mean nothing, but stacked together, they formed a pattern too obvious to ignore. Real lives leave traces. Real stories are messy, but this looked like a museum exhibit curated in advance. The more polished everything looked, the more suspicious audiences became, because authenticity does not usually arrive pre-approved. It does not get filtered, retouched, and timed to the minute. Critics said Meghan was not growing publicly. She was rewriting publicly, one deletion at a time. And once that thought entered the conversation, every missing detail became suspicious by default. Then became the piece nobody expected to matter, an old 1997 magazine. Suddenly, a forgotten publication became explosive. The issue reportedly referenced Meghan and listed an age that sent online investigators into a frenzy. If the printed number was accurate, it pointed to a birth year that clashed with the official one known for years. Not by months, by years. That is when the internet transformed from skeptical to obsessed. Because if the age was wrong, what else connected to the timeline could be wrong too? Childhood stories, career milestones, public narratives, personal history. Every date became fair game. Every claim got dragged back under the microscope. What had started as doubts over one emotional retelling was mutating into a full-scale credibility crisis. And just when people thought the story had reached maximum chaos, another old clip surfaced involving a yogurt commercial and a specific age claim that did not seem to line up cleanly either. Suddenly, years once ignored were being treated like evidence. Numbers became ammunition. Memories became suspect. The timeline was no longer stable. It was collapsing in public view. Meanwhile, Meghan's team stayed under pressure, trying to hold together a brand built on authenticity while millions were beginning to view every polished moment as performance. But the most dangerous shift had already happened. People were no longer simply reacting. They were investigating. Just when it seemed the pressure could not rise any higher, the entire storm took an even stranger turn. Because while Meghan was being dissected from every angle, another person stood in the middle of the chaos without saying a word. Prince Harry's silence became louder than any statement he could have made. He did not rush to defend. He did not clarify. He did not appear eager to calm the fire. And on the internet, silence during scandal is never read as neutrality. It gets interpreted, analyzed, weaponized, and turned into its own kind of confession. People started asking brutal questions. Where was the man who once gave explosive interviews, wrote memoir pages that shook institutions, and claimed he was choosing truth over tradition? How could someone so outspoken suddenly become invisible while his wife's story was being torn apart in real time? To some viewers, he looked like a bystander trapped inside his own life. To others, he looked fully aware and strategically quiet. But no matter which side people chose, one thing became undeniable: the stillness itself was suspicious. That contrast hit hard. This was not a man known for staying quiet when emotions ran high. This was someone who had already shown the world he was willing to speak when something mattered deeply to him. So when he chose not to speak now, audiences naturally wondered what that silence meant. Was it support? Was it distance? Was it exhaustion? Or was it something far more complicated than any headline could capture? Nobody knew. And because nobody knew, speculation rushed in to fill every empty space. Then the focus widened from Meghan alone to the partnership itself. Old interviews were revisited. Public appearances were replayed. Body language clips were broken down frame by frame. People began studying them not like celebrities, but like a puzzle. Who leads? Who follows? Who controls the narrative? Who looks comfortable? And who looks like they are trying to survive the spotlight? What began as a controversy over one shifting story turned into public scrutiny of the marriage itself. Meanwhile, the internet was not slowing down. It was accelerating. Feeds flooded with trending clips, reaction videos, breakdown threads, memes, and side-by-side comparisons. Commentary channels exploded. Gossip pages treated it like a full season finale. Tabloids sharpened their knives. Even outlets that normally avoided celebrity chaos leaned in because the story had become too big to ignore. It was no longer just drama. It was spectacle. The public split into two roaring camps. One side argued Meghan was being judged more harshly than anyone else in public life, targeted for mistakes others would easily survive. The other side said the critics had finally given voice to concerns millions had quietly held for years. Both groups were loud. Both groups were certain. Both sides fed the algorithm perfectly. Views soared. Clips multiplied. Every hour brought another viral moment. But underneath the noise, something more dangerous was happening. People were getting tired. Tired of chasing changing versions of the same story. Tired of being told what emotions to feel about a narrative that never stayed still long enough to trust. Tired of confusion dressed up as authenticity. Outrage can burn hot and disappear quickly. Skepticism is different. Skepticism settles into the bones of public opinion and stays there for years. That was the real threat. Not the headlines, not the memes, not even the critics. The threat was that audiences had started watching differently. Once people begin assuming every emotional reveal is curated, every candid moment is staged, every vulnerability has a rollout plan, trust becomes almost impossible to rebuild. A brand built built on sincerity cannot survive long once sincerity becomes the question mark hanging over every appearance. Meghan's defenders tried to shift the conversation back toward empowerment, resilience, and unfair treatment. But every attempt to redirect attention only sent more people back to old footage. More timelines were checked, more clips resurfaced, more contradictions lined up like dominoes. And once dominoes begin falling online, they rarely stop where anyone wants them to stop. Then one brutal phrase kept spreading across platforms because it summarized the mood in 6 cutting words: she is not sharing her story, she is producing it. That line hit like a hammer because it reframed everything at once. Not a woman living publicly, a director managing scenes, not spontaneity, production, not confession, strategy. Once that lens settled over the public imagination, future moments risked being viewed through it automatically. Even some former defenders grew quiet. They did not publicly switch sides. They simply stopped speaking with confidence. And silence from supporters can be more damaging than attacks from critics. It signals hesitation. It suggests uncertainty. It tells the audience that even loyal voices no longer know what to defend. When the dust began to settle, one truth stood above all the chaos. This was never just about one birth story, one magazine, one commercial, or one viral clip. It was about patterns, a shifting timeline here, a polished retelling there, missing traces from the past, private moments recorded too neatly, a husband growing quieter as questions grew louder. Individually, each piece could be dismissed. Together, they painted something much harder to wave away. And patterns are dangerous because once people see them, they cannot unsee them. The outspoken critic did not create those cracks. She simply pointed at them while millions were already staring. Then the internet did what it always does when it senses weakness in a carefully protected image. It pulled harder. Now the real question is no longer whether Meghan can return to headlines or launch another reinvention. She has done that before. The question is whether the audience waiting on the other side will still accept the next version without checking the seams first. Because once viewers start fact-checking in real time, they rarely go back to passive belief. And that is why this story still feels unfinished. More voices are waiting to speak. More footage is waiting to resurface. More threads are connected to chapters the public has barely explored. Maybe this becomes just another controversy swallowed by the news cycle. Or maybe it becomes the moment the image never fully recovers from. Nobody knows yet. But one thing is certain now. The audience is no longer watching with admiration. They are watching with suspicion. And that changes everything.